Complete Works of Charles Fort, F-O-R-T. Extraordinarily incredible book about all what he did. What Charles Fort did is he researched all of the strangest, off-the-wall, strange things that have happened on the earth that there is no explanation for, period. No explanation. And he documents it, page after page, footnotes, everything, where the article appeared, who wrote it, what page it was on. That's the glory of his book, is that everything is documented. And the stuff he talks about in his book is just incredible, to think that these things have actually happened on the earth. For instance, I'll give you a couple of examples of the kind of thing that's in his book that actually happened. And he gives you the footnotes of the newspaper it appeared in, at what day, and who wrote the article, what page. And it happened in mid-California, in the middle of California. It's only happened, I think he said, twice. It's happened in the same city. And it's a little city in mid-California. And the first time it happened was back in the 1870s sometime. And the other was in the early 1900s. In the same identical little town in California, on a crystal blue sky, no clouds in the sky, completely clear sky, huge 2, 3, 4, 5-ton stones fell out of the sky onto the town. Some of them weighing 5 to 6 tons. But they come falling out of the sky onto the town. But they don't fall at the normal rate. It takes all day for them to come down. They're coming down very, very slow. It's in the newspapers. People were out there watching it. They took pictures of it. It was in the newspaper with these big stones, some of them, like I said, 4 and 5 tons apiece, falling out of a crystal blue sky on this little town. And what was interesting is they went on to say that when the stones were finally, after all day coming down, it takes all day to get here, when it finally hit, it would bury itself into the ground. The sand would blow up, as it normally would, in slow motion. And there was an older man. He passed away, a dear friend. I've known him for many years. He was 90-something years old. I used to go visit him because he had a wonderful mind, fascinating man, knew a lot about law and all kinds of strange things. He had been in the service for many years, and the Navy, and retired. And I went to visit him many, many times and sit and chat with him and listen to all the old stories of the old days in the military and all that kind of thing. And but he was telling me, and that reminds me, I want to tell you something else. I'm going to write her name down. But anyway, he was telling me that when he was flying, he was I guess a squadron commander or something like that in the Navy. And this was back in the 40s. Late 40s, early 50s, and he said, as I was in the lead plane, and I was the captain of the lead plane. I had a bunch of them following me, and we were out over the Bermuda Triangle. And he says, I told my co-pilot to take over because he was going to the boys' room, he was going to the bathroom. So he said, I went in the bathroom and I came out, but when I came out, I was in a different plane. I was on a totally different plane. And he said, everybody looked at me like I was crazy, and I'm wondering, where the hell am I? In a totally different plane. And the guys in the plane, they're looking at me, and he says, and they were in uniforms that was older uniforms, like from the very early Air Force days. And he said, I could tell the uniforms were not the modern ones I was wearing. And he says, and they looked at me, I looked at them. And he said, then I walked past them, and nobody said anything because it was so startled to see me. And I'm startled. And he said, I'm walking up to see who's flying this plane. And there's a captain sitting there. And he said, and I talked to the captain. I asked him, what are you doing? What are you doing in this plane? And where am I? And the captain said, who the hell is this guy? He says to his co-pilot, who is this guy? Did he store away on this ship? And the captain says, I'm going to put him under arrest, and when we return, we got to find out who this guy is. He stored away on the ship. And he said, I didn't stow away on any ship. I'm a captain. See the credentials here? I'm a captain in the Navy. And he said, the other captain said, well, you may be a captain in the Navy, but on this ship, I'm the captain, not you. And so I run this ship. And so he said, so we stood there arguing with each other, and he said, so I looked at the controls, and I couldn't fly this plane anyway. I'm not familiar with this kind of a plane. I don't know. So he said, he said, go back and sit down, and we'll talk to you when we land. So he said, I went back, and I thought to myself, the hell with it, I'm going to go back into the boys' room. And he said, I went back in, and then I turn around and come back out, and I'm in my own plane. And he says, and he's like 90-some-odd years old telling me this in private. And he says, so all I'm telling you is I was there, and I was in a different plane, and I went back in time to see that I was in a plane that was many years earlier, because the guys were wearing different uniforms that wasn't in the plane we were in.
Parallel universes.
It's a parallel universe.
Or something.
Something like that. Here's what I was going to tell you about this lady. Her name was Gracie. When I came to California in 1959, one of the first places I found, it was a big house in North Hollywood, and out in the backyard, the people had a big piece of property, and out in the backyard, the owners had built about 5 or 6 little cottages, little small cottages to rent. So I got one. I moved in. And it was just like a one-room, like a little bachelor kind of thing. But when I moved in, there was a lady that only had one bedroom. All the rest of them were little bachelors, but there was a one bedroom in the middle. And in that one bedroom was a very old lady named Gracie. And she was an incredible lady. And I loved Gracie. She was very, very kind, very sweet. And so I used to run errands for her. I was 19 years old, and she's about 90. So I'd run errands for her, and she had a little dog that must have been 100 years old too. And she would push the dog out in a baby carriage and walk around the neighborhood. And everybody knew Gracie. Gracie's got the dog, and she's walking around with the dog in the carriage. I would go and for errands for her. So one night she calls me, and she said, why don't you come over for dinner tonight? I said, love to. I'd never been in her house before, her one-bedroom apartment. When I walked in her front room, I was shocked. She had all of these pictures all over the wall. It must have been 30 or 40 of them. Beautiful pictures all over the walls of all the top gangsters in the world. Al Capone, Legs Diamond, Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, Bugsy Siegel, all the big shots, all these pictures. And she was a beautiful dance hall girl in Chicago, beautiful girl. But she was in with all the top guys, period, all the mafiosis and gangsters. She said, I knew them all. They were all my friends. And so I said, Gracie, I said, this was incredible. You knew all these people? And she said, I knew them all. I said, tell me about these people. And she sat there for the rest of the evening and gave me all kinds of background on all the different mafiosi gangsters and who they were, what they were doing, who was working with who. Al Capone, she was, and
she knew all these guys from back in her dance hall days in Chicago or whatever.
She was a beautiful girl, and all the guys, and she said they all were very generous to her, always throwing money at her. And she said so she had a couple of pictures where she was actually sitting on Al Capone's lap with a bunch of other guys all around. And Capone's obviously having a ball. He's laughing with her. So I said, tell me about Capone. And she said, I asked Al that very night, I asked him in front of everybody, how is it that you are able to do what you do, and everybody in the world knows who you are, they know your face, they know what you're doing, everybody in town knows who you are, the government knows who you are, and nobody ever bothers you. You just go, you just do what you do and get away with it. How do you do that? How do you get away with something that everybody in Washington, D.C. knows who you are and what you're doing? Everybody in Chicago knows who you are, but nobody bothers you. And he said, Gracie, he said, and this is what she told me. She said, Al Capone said to me, Gracie, I am merely a small cog in a big operation. I have masters above me I answer to. It goes all the way up to Washington, D.C. I'm their boy. I take care of business for the guys in Washington, D.C., in Philadelphia, for the big shots that run this country. I take care of business for them that they don't want to do. And for that, they let me play my games and do my thing. That's it. We got an understanding. That's why I love those movies, The Godfather 1, 2, and 3. Godfather 3 was actually based on all three of them were, but especially Godfather 3 was actually based on a real-life story about propaganda due. And then, if you remember in Godfather 3, on the very beginning of the movie, Al Pacino, the Godfather, is being knighted in New York City, and in the church in New York. And the cardinal is knighting him. Incidentally, when you are knighted with a sword, when the king or queen knights you, and they put the sword on one shoulder and the sword on the other, do you know what that symbol means? It means that you are being commissioned to do something at the point of death. The sword is on you. You are not being asked to do it. You are being appointed to do it. And if you don't do it, I have the ability to take this sword from this shoulder and put it over here on this shoulder, through your neck. So that's what the symbol of the sword on each shoulder is. I'm going to go over your head this time. I'm going over your head.
But the next time,
I'm going to go through the head. That's the 13th Amendment, says that no American can be knighted. Nobody reads the law books. America's the most lawless country in the world, so we do anything we want. It doesn't matter what the Constitution says. It doesn't matter what the law says. It doesn't matter about nothing. Whatever the guys in power want to do, they do it. What are you going to do about it? So their feeling is, what you going to do about it? So if it's unconstitutional, it's a felony, it's against the law, so what are you going to do? We run your country. We own it. We own you. So what are you going to do about it? And American people, they don't know. They never read. Nobody knows anything about the 13th Amendment. They didn't even know there was 12 before it, So, but anyway, but in that movie, Godfather 3, twice they talk about P2. P2 was called, look it up, anyone listening to this program, look up some information on just the letter P. P2. It's called Propaganda Due, or P2 Lodge. There's a lot of information out there. Many books have been written by investigators in Italy on the P2 Lodge. And what P2 Lodge basically is, it's a secret society operating in the Vatican, inside the Vatican, that is actually under the auspices of a higher order. So P2 is under the auspices of another more dangerous and very, very scary operation inside the Vatican called Opus Dei, or Opus Dei. Opus Dei, Opus Dei. I'm not going to name the company, but there was a company called me and asked me if I would be interested in being a consultant to the motion picture. I went through Steven Spielberg. I went there and met the lady who was in charge of. This lady is from England. Her husband had just passed away, and I don't know if she's still there. That was quite a few years ago, but it was when Steven Spielberg first opened up his SKG Studios.
DreamWorks right
here.
DreamWorks,
SKG DreamWorks over in Glendale. And I had an opportunity to go there and to meet this lady who was the head of his research department. And so I talked with her, and I was invited to come over and talk with her, which I did. And she was telling me, she said, Stephen is a stickler for making sure things are done right on a movie. So any clothes, any terms, words, symbols, whatever would have been there. That's what he wants. He wants everything to be exactly the way it would have been. The one thing I will say, I had lunch with Michael Eisner and George Lucas and a bunch of other guys like that out at Disney. There was a private party, and I was invited to. And I got pictures of some of them on my website of me with having lunch with Eisner and Lucas. George Lucas said to me when I first met him, he said to me, well, he didn't know me, and so I went and sat down, because the way it worked is that they have food everywhere out there on all the best cooks and all the best food you can imagine, and different areas, all kinds of national foods, and you can pick whatever you want. And then they had all these tables and long chairs, long tables and chairs. So you just get whatever you want to eat and just sit down somewhere. And so I got what I wanted, and I sat down where I didn't realize where I sat down. I'm sitting right next to Michael Eisner, and across from him is George Lucas and Danny DeVito and a couple of other people. I don't know, I just sat down, and here I am right in the middle of them. And so George Lucas introduced himself, and I shook hands with him, and he said, "Your name?" And I said, "Jordan Maxwell." And he said to me, he said, "Oh, you did a book with Steve Allen, didn't you? It was a red color book, and it was called something about the book your church doesn't want you to read." And I said, "Yes, I did." And I said, I'm amazed you know about that." He said, "Well, the only reason I know is because I don't read books. I don't have time to sit and read books. But I pay a lot of people to read books for me." And he said, "But this one particular book, my wife liked. And she was very interested in this whole subject of religion and occult theocracy and all that. And so she particularly liked your part in the book, what you were writing about astrotheology. And so she made me sit down and read your part. So that's why I remember your name in the book." But Nick, the guy's name is Nick Nocerino. He passed away, and what an incredibly dear, fascinating, interesting, and wonderful man that was. Nick Nocerino. And it's good that you should know that name and look him up. You will not find a more fascinating man than that. Do you know what some of that stuff he was telling? He was telling us that the actual crystal skulls, there's 9 of them that they have today. There's hundreds of crystal skulls in South America, but there were 9 really life-size real crystal skulls. The rest of them are replicas for sale. But there were 9 crystal skulls found. And the best one, the Vatican has one of the crystal skulls, one of the 9, and the British Museum has one, the Louvre Museum has one, and Annie Mitchell Hedges, who was mentioned, mentioned in the movie, Indiana Jones, the Crystal Skull. And his name was mentioned 2 or 3 times, Mitchell Hedges.
Well, she was on a...
She found it.
She actually put her hand in and grabbed it. She was a young child at the time.
Right. She was a little girl, and she was in South America, and the father was an archaeologist, a paleontologist, and he was mulling around in the ruins, and she was too as a kid. And so she said she went over and she saw this little crystal showing from the dirt.
Yeah,
and
the light hit it, and she grabbed it. And
well, she said she cleaned off the dirt and actually saw it was a crystal skull. And she said, so she pulled that out and shows her dad. She found the skull, solid crystal, but it had a skull, and it had crystal jaws. Before I get off, my God, once we get on these subjects, I got so many of them. Dr. Roger Leir, Roger Leir, spelled L-E-I-R. Roger Leir is extraordinarily interesting man. He's right here in the outskirts of L.A.
Yeah, we've talked to him, I think, at the last...
Dear friend of mine. But Dr. Roger Leir, he's the famous doctor who takes the extraterrestrial and alien implants out of humans. Because many people who have been given implants, metal implants in their body by the aliens. Well, Dr. Leir... he's actually operated on 9 or 10 people where they actually go in. Somebody will, don't let me forget. I don't want to forget this about the cigar boxes. Remind me of the cigar boxes. Okay. So Dr. Leir said that somebody will go into a doctor to have their arm or their wrist or their leg x-rayed. And they will find in the x-ray a piece of metal inside the leg or inside the arm or the toe or whatever. The doctor will tell the person, well, I don't know if you know this or not, but you got a piece of metal inside your leg. And what's interesting is that the body does not react to it. The body doesn't know it's there. And so if you hadn't have gone in for an x-ray for something else, you would have never known it was there. But now you saw it, now you know there's a piece of metal inside your leg. And the obvious question is, first of all, how does a piece of metal get inside your leg or inside your arm or inside your foot? How does it get there? And second of all, there's no wounds, and the body doesn't react to it, so the body didn't even know it was there. So how is that possible? Well, they go in and they operate. They cut and they go in and pull this thing out and cut it off. And he says, and when they pull it out, he's shown them to me. They're little tiny diodes, little tiny things, and they're beeping a signal. You can't hear it, but it's beeping a signal. And he says, so we took it to some military laboratory, and they turn on these machines to pick up electrical frequencies, and they said, this thing is beeping a signal. Look at it, it's beeping a signal. So, in other words, people were walking around with some little diode of some kind, a little
microchip,
a little microchip or something,
yeah,
inside their body or their foot, their chest or whatever, their arm, and it's beeping a signal. And he said, and the signal is the exact frequency. All of these little things had the same identical frequency. And he said the frequency is the exact frequency that the astronauts use to communicate with the Earth. That there's a secret frequency that only NASA knows, that only NASA uses, and only astronauts are allowed to use that one frequency where nobody can pick it up. Nobody knows about it. China can't read it. Nobody else can. It's a special frequency that NASA has developed for the space and for the astronauts. And he said that's the exact frequency this little thing is beeping at. So whoever put this inside of you, whoever put this little thing inside of you, he said the thing is wrapped with some kind of a celluloid or plastic wrapping that you cannot take a surgical knife and cut. You can't cut it. It won't cut. It cannot be cut. And yet that cover around this little thing is made of your DNA. It has your DNA in that plastic film that's wrapped around that little beeping device. So somehow or another, they take a scoop mark out of your skin. They take a scoop out, and people find
your DNA mark.
And they analyze your DNA. Then they put that DNA into this plastic, and therefore, when they put it into your body does not see this thing. It doesn't register it. So therefore, you will never see it. You'll never know it's there unless you accidentally happen to go to a doctor and need an X-ray, and then they find it. But now I got a story for you.
Uh-oh. Dr.
Lears told me we've sat for hours talking about interesting stuff, and I've got some stories. I mean, Paul Tice, I got to tell you some of Paul Tice's stories too. He'll blow your mind. But Dr. Roger Lear was telling me, he said that he went to Ecuador. And when he was in Ecuador, he went down there to speak at a conference, a medical conference. He was in Ecuador. But he said, I went by to see a doctor friend of mine that I had known for many years, a good friend of mine who has a clinic down there in Ecuador. And so he said, so I went to see him. Well, this doctor has a little museum that he built down there, and all kinds of strange little artifacts that have been found in Ecuadorian jungle and the temples in Ecuador have been collected. And he's just a collector, and he's been collecting these strange little creatures and little spacemen and little rockets and all kinds of interesting stuff in this museum. So Dr. Lear said, so I was roaming around the museum with him, and he was showing me all these fascinating little things that have been found in temples, etc. And he said, then the doctor said to him, he said, now I got to show you something really interesting. He said, come to my office. So Lear says, so they go back into the doctor's office, and he goes over to the wall. He's got a wall safe, and he opens the wall safe, and there's a cigar box in the safe. And he said he pulls out the cigar box, and Dr. Lear said, I was sitting down at his desk, and this doctor, pulls out this cigar box. And he opens the cigar box, and in there are two crabs, two dead crabs. And he said he picked the two crabs up out of the box and put them in front of Dr. Lear on the desk, and told Lear, he said, look at this and you explain it to me. what are you looking at? And explain it to me. And Leo said, I took on my glasses and looked at it, and he says, I could not believe what I was actually in fact seeing. He said, these two crabs, where the eyes and the mouth would be on the crab, was a human skull, absolute to size, little tiny human skull, but perfectly proportioned. Perfectly proportioned human skull that had a bone in the back of the skull holding it, and it was connected directly into the shell of the crab, so that the skull was a part of the crab's shell, but it was separate, but it was connected by some kind of a bone. And he said, two human skulls, little human skulls looking at me, on a crab, on the two crabs. And he says, I have no idea how to explain this. And he said, I just kept looking at it. I'm thinking, what in the hell am I seeing? And he said, that's right. I don't know either. But it looks like somebody was able to manipulate DNA and were playing around with life and crossbreeding animals with animals and crossbreeding animals with humans. That's all, and it's been going on even in America, even in the island of Grenada. And so he says, so somebody had the technology and knew how to crossbreed humans with fish, crossbreed humans with animals. And I asked him, I said, look, all my life I have been told that you can't crossbreed. He said, no, that's not correct at all. We now know that DNA and our knowledge now, we now know you can cross life forms. You can cross, and he was talking about how this government, the U.S. government, along with England, Austria, and Germany, have been working on together crossbreeding animals with humans. Well, and look at Hollywood, like my dear friend Dick Gregory always says. Dick says Hollywood does three things. They tell you what your masters who own this earth, what they've done in the past, what they're doing now, and what they're getting ready to do. That's what Hollywood does.
Unfortunately, many thousands and thousands of years ago, mankind began searching the heavens for wisdom and knowledge. And like Mr. Hall said, they weren't looking to learn about, they were looking into the heavens to learn from the stars. They were looking at the stars and the constellations and the sun and the moon and trying to figure out where did these things come from. And that was the beginnings. And then for thousands of years, mankind, there's only been a handful, not all of mankind. The overwhelming majority of mankind are still on skateboards and watching Beavis and Butthead. But there has been always in the history of mankind, there have always been those who were born into this world to become geniuses. They become brilliant minds because they study. When everybody else is out drinking and partying, they are researching and studying into the late hours of night and the early mornings. They're in universities reading, studying, calculating, understanding the words, the terms, where things have come from. And they become our great teachers, of which 90% of the people will never hear anything about, because nobody seems to care about that kind of wisdom and knowledge. And so I realized that a long time ago, and boy, do I realize it now, that I have spent my entire life studying in university libraries on my own, just sitting and reading and reading and reading and cross-referencing and cross-pollinating ideas and concepts with something that was said 5,000 years ago by the Babylonians is now today we're saying the same identical thing, but we just don't know it. And so I've decided that the world of mankind is totally ill-informed and unread about the real history of the world that you live in. The history of this earth itself is staggering if you have the intellectual acumen to understand the perimeters of our history. We have artifacts which are known to be handmade artifacts, which are found in the earth in such a depth in the earth that all the paleontologists and archaeologists all agree that at that depth, that far down into the earth, the strata is at least 3 to 3.5 billion with a B, 3.5 billion years old strata going way down into the earth as furthest we can go. You're digging into the earth that's 3.5 billion years old, and yet we're finding handmade artifacts, strange and profoundly brilliant stuff. We're bringing up all kinds of handmade metals and rings and jewelry, and some of it having writings that we don't even relate to. And so it implies that there has been an intelligence, people or intelligent life. I don't know what they were 3 billion years ago, but somebody was here 3 billion years ago, because the handmade artifacts are now on display, which were dug out of strata, which is 3.5 billion years old. So try and wrap your head around that. Try and wrap your mind around that. That life on this earth, intelligent life, and I do mean extraordinarily intelligent life, has been on this earth for 3.5 billion years ago. 3.5 billion years ago, there was highly intelligent creatures on this earth. I don't know if they look like us, but I do know that according to the science of today, we are now finding handmade artifacts in the oceans or beneath the oceans. When they're drilling for oil, they hit the bottom of the ocean and they drill into the bottom, they drill into the floor of the ocean. And as they're pumping it up, as the stuff comes up, they're finding handmade artifacts which are under the ocean floor. We have pyramids the size of the Great Pyramid of Egypt on the Atlantic Ocean floor, 10 miles north of the island of Bimini, in an area called the Bahama Banks, is an enormous pyramid sitting on the ocean floor. And how many people know that? And better still, how many people even care? I've looked at this subject of the sun and the Earth's core. There was a writer, a very fascinating, interesting researcher, an older guy I heard on another radio show a long time ago, and I've been following his work. His name was Ian, I-A-N. Can't remember his last name now that I need it. I can't remember it. But he's written so many books. I think he was from South Africa, and he was writing about the earth and how it was formed, etc. And he said that all of the planets scientifically are provable, scientifically, that all the planets in our solar system are hollow at the core. They have to be hollow at the core. And maybe a small core. It's not the whole, like that, the inner earth story about the inside of the earth is a whole universe, and we are actually living on the inside of the earth and all of that stuff. But this particular writer and this particular scientist was fascinating to listen to, as he explained that his book was a very thick book written about the hollow earth, and that the earth is hollow at the center, just as all the other planets are also, and why they have to be hollow. According to scientific investigation, they have to be hollow. And I can't remember his name. I'm sure it was Ian was his original first name. But he brought out the fact that it has to be hollow because of experiments that have been done with sound waves in the earth, and that, the earth itself is not molten lava at the center at all. That is just a cover story that has no basis in scientific fact at all. and that his book was highly recommended he was talking on one of the big shows I heard, and he was saying that he's gotten so many responses from scientists around the world after reading his book that the earth is actually hollow at the core, and that it has gotten great reviews from all kinds of universities and scientists and researchers on the subject. They all have said that the book was astoundingly brilliantly written, and that it could very well be true because of the scientific stuff he was talking about that proves the earth is hollow at its core. When you see the molten lava come out of the volcanoes, so it's coming out of the earth. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the molten lava goes all the way down to the center of the earth. It's all the earth itself is nothing but molten lava. No, I don't think that at all. I don't think that is true at all. That when you see a volcano that's close to the surface, but that's not what the earth is way down deep inside the earth. It's not all molten lava. We know that there are huge bodies of water in the earth. We know that there's enormous bodies of water, whole oceans of water under the earth, along with the molten lava. And so I don't think that there's molten lava under the earth, all over the earth, all the way down to the core. I don't think that at all. That's ludicrous, is my opinion. So I think that the molten lava that we're seeing coming out of volcanoes are very close to the surface, and that there's something going on just beneath the surface of the earth, that where lava does exist, but it doesn't go all the way down through the earth so that the entire earth is filled with lava. I don't think that's logical at all. It doesn't make sense to me. And besides, I've heard scientists talking about this, and they are saying that the earth is actually hollow at the center.
My feeling after looking at this world and my own experiences for the last 55 years of looking at the occult or hidden world, I was going to say the same words, that I am totally convinced for myself that we are living in some kind of a computerized holographic universe. Something's going on which has never even crossed the minds of the human race, but is beginning to become apparent to me that it's too well coordinated, too many things, there's too much smoke not to be a fire. And, I've been told by people, in particular, one man in particular who does it well, the future. And when he tells me what's going to happen in the future, it's in minute detail, sometimes a year to a year and a half or more in the future. But it's in detail, telling me exactly where I'm going to be, what I'm going to be wearing, who I'm going to be with, what they're going to say, and where the car will be, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes into minute detail, and sure enough, a year and a half later, exactly on the day he said, at exactly the same time he said, there I am in exactly the situation he laid out a year and a half before, word for word. And so when I tell people that, they usually come up with the question, well, how does he do that? I don't care how he does that. The question is, what does that tell you about your life? What does that tell you about the world you live in? If somebody can see in minute detail something a year and a half ahead of time, I don't know what that tells me. What makes me know and feel that that it's some kind of a computerized program is because too many things have happened that would have had to have happened many, many years ago in order for it to be the right thing at the right place today when I discover it. Classic example is Richard Hoagland talks about the 19.5 configuration on the moon and the earth, etc. And we've talked, he and I have talked about that 19.5. Well, one time he told me actually it's even more finer than that. It's 19.5.25. So you go on the web and type that in, 19.5.25, and it's just tons of stuff about NASA, etc., etc. So he's right. But what's strange is that when I was looking at that on the computer, it dawned on me, my address is 19525 Ventura Boulevard. And the building must be 80 years old, so somebody had to have built that building a long time ago, and it was given that number, 19525, so that, a couple of years ago when I move in, it has to do with some sort of an astronomical calculations, and who would have known that I moved into 19.5.25. So it just amazes me, all of the synchronicity and strangeness that, and I have dreams. I've had dreams where I see myself someplace, and then eventually, a couple of days later, there I am, where I saw myself. Something is getting ready to happen to the whole human family. The entire superstructure of life on the earth, and especially human life, is now really in question. Well, I'm not sure we even understand what it is human life is really all about and who we are as humans. I mean, it's the feeling is so strong right now for me. You can cut it with a knife. I just feel something bad is coming. Some kind of a conclusion to the system.